Hey guys, tonight we're stepping into the heavy air of a medieval marketplace. The smells hit you first: damp straw underfoot, sour cheese curling in the sun, old wood smoke from breakfast hearths, and somewhere between the fishmonger's stall and the herbalist's corner, something golden and sweet. Honey. Thick, slow, sticky, and strange. Not just for bread or coughs, but for your skin. Now, if you're picturing a medieval beauty routine involving silk robes, soft towels, and rose-scented creams, you might be in for a rude awakening. Because honestly, you probably wouldn't survive a week with a medieval grooming routine, or the lack thereof. Forget 10 steps. Most people were lucky to bathe once a month. But honey? That was special. Smearable, edible, medicinal, and sometimes, intentionally left to ferment until it bubbled like wild cider. Women swore by it. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And while you're here, drop a comment with your city and what time you're listening to this. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You shuffle forward past a woman squatting on the cobbles, selling bundles of dried sage and linen rags dyed blue with woad. Her fingers are stained like she's been painting with storm clouds. She nods at you, then gestures toward a stall where bees hum softly around corked pots. The honey seller. This woman looks different. Her cheeks are glowing, a little too much perhaps, as if brushed with syrup. Her apron crackles with hardened wax, and her hands are sticky. She speaks softly, in a husky voice that sounds like she's been drinking mead all morning. Good for the throat, she says, ladling honey into a jar, but better for the skin. She scoops a sample onto a wooden spatula and offers it to a curious young girl, who dabs it onto her cheek without hesitation. You lean in. There's a scent beneath the sweetness, a sharp tang, almost like cider left too long in the sun. This isn't just honey. It's fermented. Historians still argue whether this fermentation was done on purpose or was a happy accident. Maybe someone forgot a pot by the hearth. Maybe someone noticed that when the honey fizzed, their skin glowed a little more. Whatever the origin, fermented honey became a kind of medieval miracle, beauty product, skin treatment, and occasional social repellent, depending on who you ask. The girl with the honeyed face beams. Smells like bread, she says. My husband hates it. Which is honestly a bonus. You walk further down the row. Another merchant sells beeswax combs shaped like hearts. Press it to your cheeks, she says. Softens lines. Brings out your better self. Science? No. Sincerity? Absolutely. And in the medieval world, that was enough. Nearby, a nun in a plain habit is haggling over a jar of mad honey. So called because it fizzed, and tingled, and let the demons out through the pores, depending on who you asked. The nun does not look amused, but she buys it anyway. Even God-fearing women had skin to maintain. You pause at a polished piece of brass that serves as a mirror. Your face stares back in gold-tinted shadow. Not enough to check for blemishes, but just enough to see a smudge of something sticky glinting on your chin. When did that happen? A fringe tidbit catches your ear. Some say monks, forbidden sweets during fasting periods, smeared fermented honey on their skin to absorb sweetness through the soul. Probably nonsense. But charming. One elderly woman beckons you over. She sits on a low stool with a basket of beeswax in her lap. Her skin is wrinkled but radiant. Let it ferment till it smells like wine and vinegar, she advises. Then warm it, smooth it on, and sleep like a queen. She pats her cheek. The dreams are sweeter that way. You smile, and she leans in conspiratorially. Don't let it go too far. Once I left it for a whole moon cycle. Woke up with a red patch that lasted a week. Looked like a love bite from Satan. Further down, a noblewoman reclines on a bench while her maid dabs her face with a cloth soaked in fermented honey and rosewater. Softens the complexion, the lady says. And smells of garden parties. Her maid adds quietly, also keeps the lice off, sometimes. Even the wealthiest women didn't bathe often. Water could be dangerous, cold baths risked illness, and warm baths invited bad air. Instead, they layered scents and textures, vinegar washes, flower balms, herbal tonics, and of course, honey. Always honey. Preferably from bees fed on rosemary or lavender, for a more pleasant finish. There's a small apothecary booth tucked between the butcher and the candlemaker. The man behind it offers you a dab of something he calls queen's pulp, fermented honey, crushed violets, ash of white doves. Great for smoothing wrinkles, he says. Also good for burns. Or bad poetry. Another merchant sells snail shells filled with fermented honey and chamomile. Rub them across the skin, she instructs. The shell cools, the honey heals. You wonder how many women believed. Probably all of them. Probably none. Historians still debate whether this was true medicine or pure beauty. Maybe both. Maybe neither. But it was everywhere, slathered on faces, mixed into ointments, tucked into bridal dowries. Some texts suggest honey was used in love rituals. Others claim it warded off plague. And some simply call it what it was, a sweet-smelling superstition. There's one recipe being recited beside a water trough, fermented honey, goat's milk, and a pinch of powdered pearl. Boil until thick. Apply before sleep. Meant to bring fairness to the cheeks and calmness to the heart. Whether it worked is beside the point. Belief was half the cure. You're led by a group of village girls to a quiet corner behind the food stalls, where an older woman stirs a pot of bubbling golden syrup over a low fire. The bees hum lazily nearby. She spoons a dollop into a dish and begins to mix it with ground lavender and what looks suspiciously like ashes. Face scrub, she mutters. For banishing tiredness. And men. Another girl laughs and dabs her nose with it. Sticky, she giggles. But I like it. Feels alive. That might be the key. In a world where women had so little control, over their bodies, their marriages, their choices, fermented honey felt alive. It bubbled. It moved. It transformed. And if it tingled when applied? Even better. Proof it was working. One woman tells you she smears it on her temples to ease bad dreams. Another insists it helps her keep her patience when dealing with in-laws. One, more bluntly, says it's the only thing that keeps her skin from cracking like old bread in winter. There's a comfort to it. A ritual. A rebellion, perhaps. Against age, against silence, against the idea that beauty belonged only to the noble or the clean. Even peasant girls used it. Even nuns. Even those deemed too old or too poor to care. You walk past the market's edge now, where the bees grow thicker and the sun has dipped low behind the chapel roof. The stalls are closing, and the scent of honey hangs heavy in the air, warm and golden and slightly sour. You pass a stone bench where a girl sleeps with a waxed cloth over her face. A ritual, perhaps. Or just exhaustion. Her cheeks glisten faintly in the candlelight. And whether the honey truly worked, or simply felt like hope in a jar, one thing is certain, medieval women didn't smear it on for vanity. They did it because it offered something more precious than youth. It offered quiet. Control. Ritual. A way to be seen, if only by themselves. You pause. A small streak of honey runs down your thumb. You don't know when it got there. You smile, and leave it. After all, you're starting to glow too. You leave the village square behind just as the sky shifts to a softer blue. The din of the market fades, and the road winds gently through thickets of elder and yarrow, into a sun-dappled patch of land buzzing with quiet labor. This is bee country. No polished wooden apiaries, no white-suited beekeepers. Just woven straw skeps lined up like squat, overturned baskets, each alive with thousands of tiny wings. You crouch beside one, its surface humming with movement. The air is heavy with scent, warm wax, crushed clover, something faintly sour and grassy. Here, honey isn't a luxury. It's survival. It's medicine. It's barter. And for the women who tend these hives, it's something even deeper, an inheritance passed from hand to hand like a whispered spell. A middle-aged woman with a broad back and dirt-streaked skirts greets you with a curt nod. She lifts a corner of her veil to scratch at a bee sting on her temple and mutters, "They know who's worthy." Then, more kindly, "Don't breathe too fast. They'll think you're a storm." She doesn't use gloves. None of them do. Her hands are rough, steady, and covered in tiny scars. She gently lifts the skep's lid and exposes a comb the color of old amber, glistening with fresh honey. It drips slowly into a waiting bowl. "This one's fresh. For the midwife," she says. She smears it on the bellies of first-time mothers. Says it calms the skin. Calms the baby, too. You glance at the bowl. The honey scent is floral but sharp, like something left out just a little too long. She notices your hesitation and smirks. That's the good kind. Fermented. The bees do the work. Then the air finishes it. In medieval Europe, fermentation was a mystery wrapped in usefulness. No one quite knew how or why it happened, but they knew it made things change. Honey, when left in a warm, airy place, would begin to bubble slowly. Sometimes it turned into mead. Sometimes it became medicine. And sometimes, it turned into a sort of miracle salve that women swore softened skin, lightened freckles, or kept spirits from entering through the pores. Historians still debate whether medieval women fermented honey intentionally for skin care, or whether it was simply a matter of practical preservation, making the honey last longer without spoiling. But across records from England, France, parts of Italy and the Low Countries, recipes appear with telltale signs: let it rest near the hearth, cover but do not seal, wait until it fizzes. These weren't cooking instructions. They were rituals. You follow the beekeeper down a narrow dirt path lined with tall grass. She points to an old willow tree. Under there, she says, we store the trade jars. Keep the sun off them, let the time work. Sure enough, you find a row of clay pots buried up to their necks in the dirt, their mouths covered with muslin and tied with twine. The tops are darkened from age. 3 weeks old, she says. By next market day, they'll be ready. She pulls one up and cracks the wax seal. A sour, winey smell escapes, earthy, musky, with just a trace of sweetness underneath. You wince. She grins. Don't judge it by its smell. You've never seen elbows this smooth. You help her carry the jars into a small shed that doubles as a trade post. Inside are shelves of herbs, dried fruit, linen cloths, and stacks of eggs and straw. A board scratched with chalk lists the value of each good: 1 jar equals 12 eggs, 2 jars equals 1 strip of lambskin, 3 jars equals enough dried nettles for a winter's worth of tea. But skincare? That's the real currency. Some women trade it for powders, she explains. Ground pearls, if you can get them. Some for soap. Others, for secrets. You raise an eyebrow. She shrugs. Face creams, love charms, herbs for difficult husbands. You name it. Fermented honey had become its own little economy. In some villages, it was the only thing women controlled entirely. Harvested, prepared, traded, and consumed without male oversight. No taxes, no tithes. Just jars, knowledge, and bees. In the afternoon sun, you walk to another cottage nearby. This one belongs to an old woman they call the mead crone. Not a title she resents, she earned it long ago. She sits on a stool under a grapevine, skin the color of walnut oil, hair white as lamb's wool. Before her is a large cauldron bubbling gently. The smell is sharp and heady. I cook the wild ones, she says. Not the clean honey from house bees. This comes from hedges, from graves, from the hills. You try not to look too alarmed. She laughs. It's the fermentation that matters. The sourness. Skin doesn't want sweet, it wants balance. A little sting. Like heartbreak. She pours some of the honey into a jar, adds a few sprigs of marjoram, corks it, and labels it with a scratched bee symbol. This one's for Sister Eleonora, the abbess. She rubs it on her hands before Vespers. Says it helps her remember the Psalms. A fringe tidbit, in some convents, women believed fermented honey aided memory. Mixed with crushed rosemary, it was thought to open the head. Whether that meant clarity or hallucination remains uncertain. Later that day, you pass a group of girls carrying baskets to the village center. Each is filled with small wrapped bundles, linen cloths tied around jars of honey. Some are fresh. Some are older, and when you shake them gently, they fizz faintly under the cloth. They're bringing them to the bathhouse. You follow, curious. The bathhouse isn't glamorous. It's more like a large shed with barrels of warm water and steam rising through the cracks in the roof. But it's a social hub. A place where women whisper, wash, share stories, and try one new thing before heading home. Today, that thing is honey. A fermented honey rinse, added to the water like an elixir. One girl peels off her cloak, revealing skin dotted with red patches. Milk rash, she mutters. From the churn. Another nods knowingly. They pass her a small jar. Try this. We left it under the hearth all last moon. The girl grimaces at the smell but rubs it on anyway. She sighs. Warm, she says. It tingles. This is where the beauty part comes in, not just in the ritual of softening skin or soothing blisters, but in the intimacy of the act. The trust. The laughter. The idea that a little jar of bubbling gold could make you feel, even briefly, like your body belonged to you. You sit nearby and listen. One woman jokes that her husband tried the honey and thought it was spoiled, so now she hides it in her sewing basket. Another claims she traded her last jar for a kiss from the cooper's son. He didn't know it was fermented, she says. But he smelled like wine all week. The bathhouse is full of these moments, humor, mischief, shared power. No one talks about who owns the land or who makes the rules. Here, the honey belongs to them. And through barter, through bubbling jars passed hand to hand, so does a little bit of freedom. Back outside, the sun is sinking. You walk toward the beekeeper's field again, where the skeps now glow orange in the light. She's smoking the hives gently, calming the bees. She waves at you, then lifts another comb into a shallow tray. We trade this one for salt tomorrow, she says. Then more linen. Then maybe some cloves, if the merchant still has them. You nod. You watch. And you begin to understand. Fermented honey isn't just skincare. It's economy. It's identity. It's control. In a world where women were told what to do, where to go, who to marry, how to speak, and when to bear children, they still had this, a jar, a hive, a quiet ferment. And whether it softened skin, or softened life for a moment, that alone made it worth its weight in wax. You wake early the next morning to the sound of distant bells and the rustle of linen as the village begins to stir. The sun is still low, casting long golden fingers across the dewy ground. You follow a path winding uphill toward the manor house, where the women of the household are already several steps ahead of the day. This is not just a place of labor, it's a performance. And in this world, scent is a kind of social armor. In medieval society, bathing was rare. But smelling pleasant, or at least not offensive, was crucial, especially for women of means. They couldn't rely on daily baths or perfumed soaps, but they could layer their bodies with scents drawn from herbs, oils, and yes, fermented honey. The goal wasn't to smell like roses, it was to smell controlled, cleansed, and, if possible, expensive. You step inside the manor's side door and follow the sound of hushed voices and splashing water. In a tiled chamber dimly lit by slatted windows, the lady of the house sits upright on a stool as her maid wipes her face gently with a cloth soaked in what smells like sour citrus and warm beeswax. "Don't scrub," the woman murmurs. "Pat. My skin bruises like milk." The maid nods and lifts a second cloth from a steaming basin. This one smells unmistakably of fermented honey. It's darker than the first and has a sharpness to it, like old fruit, like something halfway to vinegar. She wrings it out and presses it gently against the lady's neck. A soft sound escapes, relief, maybe. Or memory. Upstairs, in the sleeping quarters, another maid is preparing tiny linen packets stuffed with lavender, mint, crushed rose petals, and drops of sour honey. They're tucked into sleeves and collars, tied to belt loops and undergarments, placed under pillows and inside shoes. Scent wasn't just personal, it was protective. A pleasant smell, people believed, could ward off disease. Foul smells let in demons. And women who carried sweetness with them were safer, calmer, cleaner. Historians still argue whether these scent rituals were rooted in medical theory or social anxiety. But for the women who practiced them, the line didn't matter. To smell good was to be noticed, for the right reasons. To smell bad was to be punished, mocked, or dismissed. You follow one maid into the storage room, where dozens of jars line a narrow shelf. Some are labeled with crude symbols, a star, a circle, a small cross. One has a single bee scratched into the side. She unscrews the lid and dips her finger in. "This one's aged," she says softly. "We keep it at the back." You lean in to smell. It's fermented honey mixed with powdered cinnamon and dried orange peels. Not a perfume exactly, but a paste, rubbed into the creases of the neck and wrists to warm the skin and hide the scent of wool, of cooking smoke, of unwashed linens. One fringe tidbit. In some courts, especially in Burgundy, noblewomen were known to rub fermented honey onto the palms of gloves, letting the scent soak into the leather. When worn, these gloves exuded warmth and sweetness, delicate but persistent. A statement of refinement without ever opening your mouth. Down the hall, a servant is polishing a mirror, not glass, of course, but polished metal. It distorts more than it reflects. Still, the noblewoman studies her image, adjusts her coif, and dabs a finger behind her ear. A gesture passed down through generations. She glances at her daughter and says plainly, "No man wants a wife who smells like cabbage." It's harsh, but not unusual. Scent, for women, wasn't just cleanliness. It was marriage currency. A sweet-smelling daughter might catch a better match. A sour one? Left behind. And fermented honey, when mixed well, applied gently, and warmed on the skin, became a subtle form of self-presentation. Not aggressive. Not vulgar. Just, soft. Controlled. Safe. You step into the kitchen courtyard where a servant girl stirs a pot over low heat. Not a stew, but a concoction of honey, lavender, and lard. "Face balm," she explains. The old cook gets red cheeks in the cold. She adds a pinch of dried orange rind and stirs slowly. "This batch'll keep for months, if you don't let it mold." Not all of this was science. Some of it was mimicry. The lower classes saw the rituals of noblewomen and imitated them in small, affordable ways. A teaspoon of fermented honey mixed with ash for a crude deodorant. A dab behind the knee to ward off itching. A drop on a comb before brushing lice-ridden hair. You remember now, in the marketplace yesterday, one of the women mentioned vinegar mixed with honey. You hadn't thought much of it, but here it is again, in every corner of the manor. Not just for smell, but for mood. A sharp scent wakes the mind, one lady says to her handmaid. Too sweet, and you'll fall into nonsense. A recipe book is laid open in the library. It's not printed, of course not, but handwritten with cramped lines and smudges. One page lists a cleansing potion for the armpits, honey, rosemary, stale wine, ground salt, and the ashes of a goose feather. For long events, the note says. And horses. You stifle a laugh. A passing servant offers you a honey lozenge rolled in pepper. For breath, she says. And bravery. There's another layer here, beyond scent. These honey-based preparations weren't just about smelling clean. They were about control. In a life where most decisions were made by men, where your marriage, your dowry, your movements, and even your speech were dictated, scent was one thing a woman could curate. A scent could enter a room before you did. It could make someone pause. It could be remembered. And fermented honey carried weight. It was not floral. It was not girlish. It was ancient, complex, a little bit unpredictable. When applied properly, it didn't scream. It whispered. You're told of a noblewoman in Poitiers who wore no perfumes, only a thin honey balm rubbed on the nape of her neck. It smelled faintly of clover and old wine. People said her presence lingered even after she left a room. Her husband, they whispered, gave her no children but never remarried after she died. Of course, there are critics. One monk's letter from the 1300s describes fermented honey scent as decay hidden under silk. But the same monk later praises its use in curing a swollen throat. The line between medicine and indulgence was always blurry. You move to the chapel, where candles burn low and the air is thick with incense. A woman kneels quietly, her veil drawn close. As she bows, you catch the faintest scent of honey and crushed myrtle. It clings to her sleeve. It is deliberate. She is alone, but not anonymous. And you realize, scent is status, yes, but also signal. In a world without deodorant or daily baths, you had to choose carefully what you carried with you. Women crafted these choices from the tools available, honey, herbs, lard, lemon, sweat, vinegar, and turned them into identity. Outside, the wind shifts. You smell livestock again. Smoke. But beneath it, just beneath it, fermented honey, sharp and sweet, traveling like a ghost across the manor lawn. And maybe, just maybe, that was the goal all along. To be remembered. You've seen how scent was strategy, how fermented honey was more than a smear of sweetness. Now, step deeper into the polished corridors and candlelit chambers of a medieval court, where the women walk softer, speak quieter, and never, ever, let you see the work behind the beauty. But make no mistake, beneath every smooth cheek and perfumed veil was an invisible labor force of tricks, tools, and time-honored rituals. And right at the center of it all, fermented honey, again. You're in a castle now, though it doesn't gleam like the stories promise. The stones sweat in summer, freeze in winter. Fires crackle in the grates, but only reach the knees. The air smells of wax, wool, wet stone, and something herbal, a mix of rosewater and clove, with that unmistakable undernote of something sour-sweet, fermented honey, again at work behind the scenes. A young lady of the court is seated in front of a mirror, one made of burnished silver. It reflects little more than outlines and movement, but still, she leans forward. Her maid, crouched beside her, holds a tiny bronze spoon and dips it into a shallow bowl. The contents shimmer in the light, thick, amber-colored, with small bubbles rising from beneath the surface. That one's fresh, the maid says. From the spring harvest. We let it sit just 10 days, long enough to soften, not long enough to sting. She applies it gently, first across the forehead, then along the cheekbones in smooth, upward strokes. No scrubbing. No dragging. Always upward. Always tender. A court lady's skin was not just her canvas, it was her currency. To be beautiful in court was not optional. It was strategy, survival, even diplomacy. Marriage alliances, dowry negotiations, influence with powerful men, they all started with presence. And medieval presence meant a clear, pale face, free from pox scars, with the faint glow of health, not too pink, not too brown, not too bold. Fermented honey was one of the few tools that bridged all classes. In court, however, it came dressed in finery. Mixed with crushed saffron for golden tint. Infused with rose or violet. In one Italian court, noblewomen added tiny pearls, ground into powder, and stirred into honey for moonlight brightness. In France, it was mixed with egg white and painted onto the face at night, left to dry and harden, then flaked off in the morning, like shedding the old year, one noblewoman wrote. Historians still debate whether these rituals were effective or merely symbolic. Did the honey actually help? Maybe. It certainly moisturized. It may have acted as a mild antibacterial. But more than that, it offered structure. A ritual. A space in which women had power, even if only in the mirror. You watch as a second lady enters the chamber. She holds a folded cloth in one hand and a pot of honey in the other. She's flushed, out of breath. "I couldn't sleep," she says. "I think I'm going to boil it again. It's too sharp. It bites." Her friend laughs. "That means it's ready." She sits, and they begin again. This time, they mix the fermented honey with a drop of almond oil and crushed dried violets. The scent is intoxicating, floral with a sour edge. "My mother swears by it," the second lady murmurs. Says it kept her young until she turned 35. Then she aged like bread. A fringed tidbit surfaces from the chambermaid, who leans in as she sets down a new towel. Lady Cecilia stores her honey pots in the dovecot. Claims the pigeons keep the demons away from it. That kind of belief wasn't uncommon. Some noblewomen stored their honey in churches, convinced the proximity to holy ground made it more potent. Others swore by fermenting it under full moons, and one Portuguese countess reportedly buried her honey in a crypt for 40 days, to awaken its soul. You walk through the antechamber where another servant is carefully folding linen strips. These will be soaked in a fermented honey rinse, then placed over the eyes during rest. For puffiness, she explains. And to keep the dreams light. The lady of the house passes by. She pauses, sniffs the air. "Is that the clover batch?" "Yes, my lady." "Good. That one helps with headaches." It wasn't just about beauty, you realize. It was comfort. It was care. These women lived under pressure, to marry well, to smile sweetly, to hide pain, illness, even boredom. A dab of honey behind the ear wasn't just cosmetic. It was a balm, a moment of peace, a way to control something, anything, in a world that constantly assessed them like livestock. In another chamber, you overhear two women discussing the honey mask for blushing. One says it cures her anxiety. The other rolls her eyes. "It just clogs my nose." Another says she uses it after arguments with her husband. "So I look peaceful when we dine." One manuscript from a French court physician recommends fermented honey as a poultice for the nerves of women. Whether it calmed the nerves or simply forced the wearer to lie still with honey on their face for 20 minutes, we may never know. In a quiet alcove near the chapel, you find a noblewoman alone. She's older than the others, her gown more modest, her veil heavier. She dips a finger into a small jar and dabs at her temples. She doesn't look at you. She simply says, "This is what I have left. My sons are grown. My husband is gone. But the bees still visit." She closes the jar. Her fingers are stained yellow from saffron. She smiles. "And I still glow." Outside, you spot the court herbalist carrying 2 jars toward the kitchens. You follow. He explains he's preparing a new batch, fermented honey, lavender, sage, and 3 drops of camphor. For the lady's joints, he says. And her mood. Mood, it seems, was an unofficial medical condition among noblewomen. Doctors rarely understood it. Priests blamed it on the moon. Women managed it themselves, with balms, scents, fermented pastes, and rituals shared behind closed doors. The queen's chambermaid, older than all the rest, tells you that in winter, fermented honey was applied to cracked heels and chapped lips before bed. It smells like rot, she admits, but works better than any physician. As evening comes, you wander out onto the parapets. Below, the bees still hover over the court's hives, their tiny bodies bouncing in the fading light. Inside, candles flicker. Women rinse their cheeks. Towels are folded. Small jars are hidden in cupboards, under pillows, in boot trunks. And you realize, fermented honey wasn't simply a beauty tool. It was a secret. A whisper. A softness shared between women in a world that expected them to be sharp, silent, and always perfect. They didn't just use honey to shine. They used it to survive. You leave behind the echoing chambers of the court, no more silver spoons, saffron masks, or servants pouring rosewater over marble basins. This time, you're stepping into the heart of medieval domestic life, the kitchen. Not the castle's polished service wing, but the smoky, soot-blackened hearth of a peasant cottage, where everything, food, warmth, rest, healing, and yes, beauty, starts with a fire, a pot, and a little bit of whatever hasn't spoiled yet. The door creaks open, and you're greeted by a blast of warmth, thick, uneven, edged with the smell of onions, wet wool, and something sour-sweet. A girl is bending over a cauldron, stirring with a long wooden spoon. Behind her, on the stone ledge above the hearth, you spot it, a squat clay jar, dark around the rim, beeswax still crusted around its mouth. It's honey, fermented, by the smell of it. Not the golden kind you drizzle on cake. This honey is brownish, sluggish, and smells faintly like overripe fruit left too long in the sun. The woman stirring glances up. Her sleeves are rolled to the elbow. One hand is wrapped in linen, stained with something amber. Got burned yesterday, she says plainly. Grease jumped from the pan. Put this on soon after. She unwraps the cloth and reveals red skin, no longer raw, but tight, glossy, healing. It stung at first, she adds. Then cooled down. It always works. This is the first lesson of peasant skin care. Everything useful had to earn its keep. Fermented honey was no indulgence here. It was kitchen medicine. One of the few things a woman could trust to pull double duty, good for a sore throat, good for a scalded hand. Rubbed on cracked heels in winter, dabbed behind the ears when lice got bad, mixed with goat fat and stored for months to be used as a balm for babies with rash. No shimmer. No luxury. Just usefulness. The girl by the hearth nods to another pot nearby. That one's for faces. My sister's wedding's next week. You peer inside. It's a thick mixture. Fermented honey, ground oats, and something chalky. Crushed eggshell, she explains. Scrubs off the ash and softens the nose. No one here calls it exfoliation. They call it clearing. Cleaning. Smoothing. Brightening, sometimes. But always practical. Always within reach of the spice shelf or the root cellar. Historians still argue whether peasant women had a concept of beauty in the way courts did. The records are sparse. But in oral histories, diaries, and even regional proverbs, you find hints. Women who boiled parsley in vinegar to rinse their hair, who chewed fennel seeds for breath, who rubbed a mix of sour cream and honey under their eyes before feast days. Beauty wasn't an abstract ideal. It was preparedness. A way to show up. A teenage girl bursts in, cheeks flushed from the cold. She's holding a rag pressed to her chin. Pig kicked me, she says simply. The woman at the hearth doesn't blink. She unties the girl's scarf, examines the forming bruise, then reaches for the honey jar. No measuring. Just instinct. A dollop on a cloth, pressed gently to the skin. Hold it there, she says. It'll keep it from swelling too much. Might sting. A few seconds pass. The girl grins. It stinks. The woman laughs. Better than pig stink. That's another lesson. Humor is part of the treatment. You're invited to stay for lunch, barley porridge, leeks, and a thin broth with bits of salt pork. No plates, just wooden bowls passed hand to hand. After the meal, while the pot is still warm and the ashes are glowing, the women pull out a second honey jar, this one thinner, more pungent. This one's gone nearly to mead, someone says. Makes the skin feel alive. They spread it across their cheeks with the backs of their spoons, sit cross-legged by the hearth, and wait. No mirrors. No timers. Just habit. Conversation drifts from gossip to planting schedules to a strange rash someone's cousin got after walking barefoot through a haunted pasture. We tried the honey, they say. It laughed at us. One woman mentions that her grandmother stored jars of fermented honey in the attic, believing that being closer to the sky pulled out the sickness. Another swore it only worked if stirred with the same stick each time, anything else would confuse the potion. Fringe? Absolutely. But this is where folk belief and function blur. The line between science and story wasn't firm. If it tingled, if it warmed, if it gave results, even just a little, that was enough. You ask about preparation. The process is simple, but fussy. You gather honey, as old as possible. Raw is best. You mix in a little rainwater or, if you're lucky, juice from boiled apples or plums. Sometimes they add dried herbs, chamomile, sage, marigold. Then cover with linen, store it near the hearth, and wait. The mixture begins to bubble, gently at first, then more eagerly as the days pass. You learn that women judge its readiness by smell. If it smells like fruit wine, it's done. If it smells like feet, toss it. Another says, I like the kind that smells like cider gone wrong. That one makes me sleep like a rock. It wasn't just for skin. Some women rubbed fermented honey on their chests before sleep, claiming it warded off bad dreams. Others applied it to the soles of their feet for fevers. You hear one account of a woman who rubbed it on her knees before confessing to her priest, to soften the truth. The records don't preserve these stories. But they live here, in fire-warmed kitchens, in whispered recipes passed from mother to daughter, in stained spoons and cracked jars that smell like vinegar and comfort. Outside the cottage, you find a small herb garden, half frozen by the season. A woman plucks the last of the marigolds and mashes them into a paste with honey and pig fat. For elbows, she explains. And backaches. She grins. If you rub it on a man's feet, he'll sleep all night without turning. You learn that in some villages, girls saved their best batch of fermented honey for feast days, when the traveling musicians came, or when marriages were discussed. They'd wash their faces the night before, smear the mixture over their arms and collarbones, and sleep wrapped in soft cloths. The next morning, they'd glow. Or at least, they'd feel like they did. One scholar describes a case from 14th century Flanders in which a woman was buried with a pot of honey sealed in linen. Whether it was meant to preserve her body or bless her spirit is unclear. But someone thought it mattered. As the fire dims and the girls begin to tidy up, you realize that this, more than court rituals or cloistered concoctions, is the soul of medieval skincare. Not ceremony, but consistency. Not glamour, but resilience. A belief that even in a world where the soil was cold, the days were long, and the hands always raw, a small act of softness mattered. And in the hands of women who had no time, no wealth, and no audience, fermented honey was more than a tool. It was a pause. It was care. It was theirs. It starts with a spot. Just one. Small. Pink. barely visible beneath the soot smudges on the cheek of a girl hanging laundry in the morning sun. But her mother sees it. Pauses. Frowns. "Fetch the honey," she says without looking up. "The good one. The one we left by the stove since Candlemas." And just like that, the ritual begins. You're in a modest thatched cottage at the edge of a medieval village. Inside, the air smells of nettle tea, old bread, and a strange sweetness, like fruit turned sour, like honey that's gone just a little too far. Which, of course, it has. That's the point. The jar is brought down from the shelf, unwrapped, and placed on the table like a relic. It bubbles slightly. The lid gives a soft pop when opened. Fermented honey. They dip a finger in, smear it across the girl's cheek, and mutter a short prayer under their breath. The girl doesn't flinch. She's been through this before. Because in this world, a blemish isn't just a blemish. It's a warning. A stain. A question whispered across hedgerows and down narrow lanes: why did that mark appear? What does it mean? Historians still debate just how deep these beliefs ran. Was a mole on the neck simply a birthmark? Or was it a sign of demonic influence? Was a freckled face considered kissed by the sun, or cursed by unclean blood? The answer depends on where you are, who's looking, and whether anyone in the village has died lately. Here, in this particular village, the rules are clear. A red splotch on a girl's cheek in spring means bad luck in love. A blistered chin during a waning moon suggests jealousy. A raised bump near the left eye. Someone's been touched by the night thoughts. No one can quite explain what that means. But everyone nods when it's said. You walk past a cluster of women scrubbing turnips near the well. One of them pauses to scratch at her neck, revealing a pale scar edged in pink. Got this during the hard winter, she mutters. I said something cruel to my mother. Next morning, this. She doesn't say it's a punishment. She doesn't need to. In medieval daily life, a woman's skin was believed to mirror her moral state. If you were clean of spirit, your face would be clear. If you lied, lusted, stole, or spoke out of turn, your skin would betray you. A new spot on your chest meant too much pride. A pimple between the brows meant you thought too hard on impure things. You couldn't hide it. But you could try to fix it. And that's where fermented honey came in. You enter another cottage where an elderly woman is preparing what she calls a poultice for regret. It consists of fermented honey, aged at least a fortnight. Ash from last Sunday's hearth. Dried sage, crushed finely with the back of a spoon. A single tear, if you can manage one. She smirks. Tears make it stick better. She applies the paste to a swollen bump on her wrist, wraps it with linen, and nods to herself like she's settling a score. A teenage girl nearby has a long brown birthmark on her jaw. You ask about it, and she says simply, my aunt says it's the mark of the river. Mama says I was born under a sorrow star. Either way, I scrub it every night with the cider honey. She lifts a small bottle, half filled with a cloudy amber liquid. It tingles, she adds. That's how I know it's working. Not everyone believed in spirits or omens. But everyone believed in tingling. Some believed that fermentation drew the badness out. That the fizzing bubbles were tiny spirits fighting off the affliction. A fringe tidbit you overhear in passing: if it doesn't bubble when you stir, the devil's won. A dramatic assessment, but it explains why so many women refuse to use fresh honey. It had to be aged. Fermented. Lively. You visit the home of a midwife, her hands stained with dried herbs. She shows you her skin book. A handmade ledger with pages made from rag parchment, filled with charcoal sketches and notes in a spidery hand. One page is titled, Spots of the Heart. Another reads, Red blooms that rise before sorrow. Next to each entry, a honey remedy. Some are simple, just fermented honey and vinegar. Others require more flair: boiled dandelion sap, powdered clove, a whisper of a dead man's name. You raise an eyebrow. She shrugs. Some spots need more convincing than others. In one corner of the village, a girl no older than 8 is playing with a string doll when her sister shrieks and points, a blister on her knee. The mother rushes over, lifts the hem of the dress, and inspects the mark with the seriousness of a battlefield medic. "Did you speak ill of the priest again?" she hisses. The child blinks. "He smells like onions," she whispers. The mother shakes her head. "That's enough." Later, you see her preparing a wash. Fermented honey, salt, and a sprig of thyme, mixed in a wooden bowl and heated slightly over the hearth. She rubs it into the girl's knee with care, murmuring something rhythmic. Not all spots were suspicious. Some were simply inconvenient: interruptions on a girl's wedding day, distractions during mass, sources of shame during confession. But when a spot refused to fade, or reappeared in cycles, that's when the murmurs began. That's when you visited the healer, the midwife, the aunt with the quiet house and the 4 jars. You peek into one such house. 4 jars indeed, each labeled not by word but by carved symbols. A circle, 4 blemishes of pride. A triangle, 4 blemishes of grief. A star, 4 unspoken sins. A crescent moon, for the ones we're born with. Each contained a different mixture of fermented honey and herbs. You're told that application must be done in silence, facing east, just before dawn, and always with clean hands. You ask if it works. The woman looks at you and smiles softly. Sometimes the spot fades. Sometimes it stays. But the worry fades. That's enough. Back in the market, a vendor is selling linen masks soaked in sour honey and ground rose petals. For the girls who dream too much, she calls out. Keep the dreaming in your heart, not on your face. You watch as a line forms, not of young girls, but of older women, each with their own reasons, none spoken aloud. As the day winds down, and the clouds begin to break, the village quiets. The jars are sealed. The spots are covered, salved, or left alone. Some women sleep with honey on their faces, some beneath their pillows, some in jars buried under stones in the garden. The remedies vary. The beliefs hold steady. Because in this world, where mirrors are rare and gossip is currency, your skin doesn't just reflect your health. It reflects your soul. And if fermented honey helps, even just a little, then it is not just medicine. It's protection. It's penance. It's hope. You wouldn't expect it here, behind the thick stone walls of a medieval abbey, where the echo of daily prayers still hangs in the air like slow-moving mist, and every hour is marked by bells instead of clocks. You expect discipline, scripture, cold water, and colder silence. But what you find instead, what surprises you as you walk the cloisters and step quietly through herb-scented corridors, is a softness, a warmth, a kind of quiet glow that has nothing to do with stained glass or candlelight. It's in the skin. The skin of the sisters who live here. Pale, yes. Often weathered by wind and long hours in the garden. But cared for. Smooth in places. Rosy in others. Not from luxury, and certainly not for vanity. But from something more intentional, something older and more intimate, a tradition of self-care wrapped in routine and prayer. And at the center of it all, again, is fermented honey. It begins in the garden. Surrounded on all sides by stone arcades, the abbey's herbarium is small but vibrant, neatly plotted rows of sage, thyme, yarrow, marigold, lavender, and rosemary, all grown for medicine, teas, tinctures, and balms. Bees hum low among the blossoms. Tucked along the far edge, near the east wall that catches the first sunlight, are the skeps, squat, coiled straw hives that blend into the stones around them until you catch the glint of golden comb or the tiny flicker of a worker bee drifting back from a morning flight. A young nun tends them with bare hands and a quiet calm that comes only from long practice. She lifts one lid just slightly and peers inside, nodding as she murmurs a line from a psalm, whether for the bees or for herself, it's hard to say. You follow her back to the kitchen wing, where a low shelf holds a row of ceramic jars labeled in Latin. Some are straightforward, mel depuratum, oleum rosarum, others more cryptic. A jar marked only with a single bee, another with the word losum, meaning light. One sister opens a jar and dips a linen pad into a golden paste that clings thickly to the cloth. It's for the hands, she explains, rubbing the cloth between her palms. From Sister Apollonia. Fermented honey and a little thyme. Keeps the skin from splitting in winter. She offers the pad to you, and the scent rises, sweet, but sharp. Not the friendly, floral honey of the marketplace. This one smells older, darker, like fruit left too long, like something that's begun to transform. In the scriptorium, another sister shows you a small stone container tucked among her ink pots. For the fingertips, she says. When the parchment is too dry. She applies it before long copying sessions, massaging it lightly into each finger. You need touch to stay precise. It isn't about being lovely. It's about being functional, resilient. And somewhere in that practicality, a kind of beauty endures. Historians debate how much personal care was permitted inside religious communities. Some abbeys discouraged it, fearing vanity. Others encouraged it, especially when the body was being prepared as a vessel for God's work. What's clear is that many of these women left behind records, not just of prayer and theology, but of recipes, blends, and gentle routines. In the library, Sister Beatrice shows you a parchment page preserved between two heavier tomes. It contains instructions for a balm against skin dryness, aged honey, elderflower, powdered rose petals, and just a trace of rendered goose fat. Apply it before Compline, and never during fasting days. There is no justification for the exception. You sense there didn't need to be. This knowledge was lived. Even novices have their own tiny jars, gifts passed down from older sisters or mixed under the supervision of the infirmarian. A group of them sits near the window, folding cloths into squares, dipping each in a bowl of honey steeped with dried violet and marjoram. They hum softly as they work, not a hymn exactly, but not far off. This is the dreaming balm, one says. We press it into our temples when we've read too much. It keeps our sleep from wandering. You ask if it works. They only smile. Not everything here is explained. Some jars are stored in sunlit niches, others in shadowed corners. One jar is kept beneath a small wooden crucifix, its lid wrapped in linen and tied with red thread. You're told it belonged to a sister who used it daily for 50 years and left behind a note that simply said, "This helped me remember who I was." Whether she meant the honey or the habit, no one is sure. There's a fringe belief shared in whispers that honey fermented inside abbey walls ages differently, closer to grace, as one puts it. A few sisters believe that stirring it while reciting psalms gives it more strength. Others say the real magic is in waiting. Let it rest 40 days, no more, no less. If the linen covering the jar stains with gold, it is ready. Before evening prayer, a few of the older sisters gather in the washroom. Bowls of cool water are passed hand to hand. A drop of honey balm is added to each. Faces are patted dry with linen. Hands are rubbed gently with cloths that smell of rosemary and vinegar. Veils are smoothed, not in vanity, but in preparation, because to sing well, the body must not distract. And chapped lips or burning cheeks are distractions. So they tend to them, quietly, kindly. You ask Sister Benedicta, the infirmarian, what she thinks of it all, the honey, the rituals, the little comforts. She doesn't answer right away. She reaches instead for her own jar, small and dented, and opens it with practiced ease. It keeps me steady, she says. There's too much cold in this life. Cold stone, cold air, cold expectations. This, she dabs a bit on her wrist, reminds me there's still warmth. You notice too that for the nuns, fermented honey isn't always applied directly to the skin. Some add it in drops to their washing water, others steam it with herbs to breathe before sleep, and a few even burn honey-drenched wicks in little clay lamps to scent their cells. One sister gently scrapes a honey salve onto the inside of her prayer book cover, not for any medicinal reason, she says, but so that the scent fills the air when she opens it. It reminds me of the garden. And the bees. And being alive. These acts are deeply personal, sometimes bordering on private. They aren't prescribed, and no one compares their skin or boasts about glow. It's care for care's sake. Tenderness embedded in habit. During Lent, the honey is often hidden away, not because it's forbidden, but because it is precious, and too sweet to fit the mood. One nun keeps her jar wrapped in linen embroidered with black thread. Another buries hers beneath the flagstones in her cell, to let it sleep as we sleep less. When Easter comes, they unseal the jars, gently stir the surface, and dab the balm back on like a blessing. The return of softness after deprivation feels almost sacramental. That night, the abbey is silent but not still. The bees sleep. The fires burn low. And in dozens of small cells, beneath folded linen, under bowls and tucked into wooden drawers, sit jars of fermented honey, some sharp, some sweet, some blended with oils and herbs, others pure and aged. They are not sacred, but they are not mundane. They are soft things, small things, kept close. Not for show. Not for praise. But for continuity. For comfort. For care. And as you lie on your own narrow cot in a guest cell, listening to the distant rustle of veils and the whisper of bare feet on stone, you catch a trace of something in the air. Not incense, not beeswax, but something older. A scent of honey turned slightly, warmed by breath and patience. A memory, perhaps, of the time before ambition and after vanity. The time when care is given quietly, daily, without needing to be earned. And in that stillness, you finally understand, even behind the strictest walls, the body finds ways to speak. And sometimes, it whispers through honey. You step beyond the abbey's sheltered walls, past the cloisters and the candlelight, into a different world entirely. The villages here are smaller, rougher, closer to the bone. No carved altars or velvet hymnals, just wood smoke and earth and the quiet shuffle of lives lived close to nature. It's early morning, and a low mist curls along the hedgerows. Somewhere a rooster is crowing too late, and a dog barks twice before going silent. You follow the footpath down into the valley, to where the trees grow thicker and the houses fewer, until you reach a bend in the stream where a cluster of herbs grows wild, foxglove, mugwort, comfrey, and something sweet and yellow that you don't recognize but smells faintly of honey and bruised apples. A woman is already there, kneeling by the water. Her skirts are damp at the hem and she's humming, not loudly, but with a rhythm that seems to match the flow of the current. She doesn't startle when she sees you, just glances up and nods. A bowl rests beside her, filled with blossoms and a lump of something dark amber and sticky. Fermented honey, you realize again. But not the kind you saw in the abbey. This has flecks of crushed root and is laced through with tiny red threads that shimmer in the morning light. She dips her fingers in and massages the paste onto her temples, murmuring words you can't quite catch. Maybe they're a prayer. Maybe they're not. This is where the lines begin to blur. Because for every nun tending a balm in the name of God, there's a woman like this, half healer, half outcast, whose every gesture walks the line between care and danger. In the medieval countryside, herbalists were common, but trust was rare. One wrong plant, one sick child, one neighbor with a grudge, and you could go from wise woman to witch by the time the sun set. And fermented honey? It was often caught in the middle. Too sweet to be medicine, too active to be innocent. It frothed. It bubbled. It changed itself. And that frightened people. You follow her back to her home, a crooked thatched cottage nestled beside a circle of rowan trees. Inside, it smells of damp wood, smoke, and lavender. She stirs something in a pot on the hearth, goat's milk, honey, nettle, and a pinch of sulfur. For the skin, she says. And the spirit. You put it on your cheeks and it draws the night out. Whether she means fatigue or demons is unclear. A child comes in, barefoot and muddy, and she wipes his face with the mixture before sending him off again. No soap. No warning. Just ritual. On her shelves sit dozens of jars, some labeled, others simply marked with scratches or feathers or bits of twine. One has a sliver of quartz tied around its neck. Another is sealed with wax and thorn. She picks one up, sludgy with dark honey and something bitter, and laughs when you hesitate. This one's for husbands, she says. Not to poison. Just to make them sleep. She shrugs. Mostly. Historians still argue whether these women were part of a continuous medicinal tradition or something more mystical. Some say they inherited Roman and Celtic herbcraft, passed down through mothers and midwives. Others think the knowledge was patchy, stolen from monks' texts, misremembered prayers turned into potions. The truth, as always, is messier. What's clear is that their remedies often worked, at least well enough to earn loyalty, or suspicion, or both. She offers you a drink, mead infused with rosemary and steeped in wild honey. It clears the blood, she says, sipping her own. And keeps the face soft. You ask how she learned to ferment the honey that way. She gestures to a pile of rotting apples near the back door. They teach you. You leave the honey near something that knows how to change, and it learns. It sounds like nonsense. But the logic holds, in a way that only medieval logic can. Nature teaches. Time teaches. And women, who are often left waiting and watching, learn what no one else does. Outside, an older woman limps up the path with a wrapped bundle. She's complaining of joint pain and a dry rash on her arms. The healer nods, takes the bundle, and unrolls it. Inside is a chunk of beeswax, a few rosemary sprigs, and a folded piece of cloth stained with something brown. Payment. She mixes a fresh balm right there by the fire. No scales, no measurements. Just memory. She adds fermented honey and a few drops of oil, stirs with her finger, and smears it on the woman's wrist. The smell is sharp, vinegary, medicinal. Leave it on until the moon rises, she says. Then bury the cloth. Is it ritual? Is it science? It's hard to tell. And this uncertainty, is what made women like her dangerous. Not because they were evil, but because they knew things no one else could explain. And in a world where knowledge is power and power is reserved for men, that kind of knowing is threatening. Even when it's just about skin. You sit outside her cottage while she gathers herbs for drying. Chickweed, yarrow, calendula. She talks as she works. There's a balm I make when someone's been cursed, she says. Not real curses, just the kind that sit on your chest like a rock. I use honey that's turned sour and blend it with ash from 7 fires. Rub it on the feet. They always cry. Then they sleep. She pauses. It's not the balm. It's the care. The touch. The smell of something alive again. In town, they whisper about her. Some call her a gift. Others call her dangerous. Children run past her door and toss stones when they think she's not looking. And yet, when a baby won't sleep or a man can't breathe or a woman's face breaks out in welts, they come knocking. Quietly. At night. You remember now a strange law passed in a nearby region, a real one, where any woman found keeping more than 3 jars of unmarked herbal salves could be tried for sorcerous behavior. That included fermented honeys. Especially if they bubbled. Because what kind of God-fearing woman lets her pot hiss and spit in the dark? What kind of woman smiles when her honey ferments? One who knows too much. One who listens to bees and trusts decay. A fringe belief floats into your mind, that some of these women could tell the future by how the honey bubbled. If the foam was pale, the week ahead would be easy. If it rose too fast, beware of visitors. If it overflowed, someone was lying to you. You ask the healer if she believes any of that. She grins. Sometimes. Depends who's asking. And then she leans in, lowering her voice. But here's something I know for certain. When you smear fermented honey on your face, you feel brave. Not because of what it does to your skin, but because it wakes something up. You smell it. You taste it, even. And you remember you're still changing. Like the honey. Like the fruit. That scares people. They want you still. Predictable. But you're not. You stay until twilight, sipping tea steeped with bee balm and elderflower. The healer lights a small dish of honey mixed with salt and sets it beside her door. For protection, she says. And peace. It smells like bread and vinegar and sun-warmed stone. She thanks you for listening and hands you a jar, unlabeled. You don't ask what's in it. You just tuck it into your coat and begin the walk home. And as you go, you realize that somewhere between potion and lotion, between healing and hiding, fermented honey became more than skin care. It became rebellion. A quiet, sticky kind. Carried in clay pots. Applied in the dark. Passed from woman to woman with no ceremony but the warmth of hands. And that perhaps, in a world that feared both knowledge and softness, that was the most dangerous magic of all. You lean over a wash basin in the corner of a small stone room lit only by a narrow slit of sunlight, and there you are, barely. Not a clear face, not even a full outline. Just a hint. A blur of cheek, the pale arc of a forehead, the glint of eyes that seem slightly off from where you know your eyes to be. The polished brass dish you're peering into is warped at the edges and dulled by time and touch. It's not a mirror by modern standards, not something you could use to tweeze a brow or admire a hairstyle. But it's something. And in this world, that matters more than you'd expect. Because mirrors, as you think of them, flat glass, silvered backs, crisp reflections, don't exist yet. At least, not for you. Maybe in the distant lands of Venice, behind locked doors in glassmakers' workshops, there are whispers of something better. But here, in your small medieval world, reflections come in three forms: burnished metal, still water, and the eyes of others. You run your fingers along the brass rim. It's been passed down, mother to daughter, maid to mistress. The metal remembers more faces than you'll ever meet. Each time it was polished with ash and cloth, it saw something new. A young bride on her wedding day. An old woman checking a mole. A girl wondering why her nose seemed so different in the reflection. Historians still argue whether medieval people had a strong sense of individual self-image. Some believe the absence of clear mirrors meant less vanity, less obsession with appearance. Others say that's nonsense, that people have always longed to see themselves, and when tools were limited, imagination filled the gaps. You lean back from the brass and stare at the flicker of your own outline. You don't see every blemish, every strand of hair. But you see a mood. A presence. That's what matters here. In wealthier homes, women might have access to polished silver or even imported glass backed with tin. But even then, the image is unstable. Wavering with the light, distorted by the angle. You remember the noblewoman who applied her fermented honey with a silver spoon and used a mirror no larger than a locket. She squinted into it, then sighed. "I prefer candlelight," she said. "It forgives." And that may be the secret. When reflections are unreliable, they become negotiable. A certain kind of freedom blooms. You're not trapped by the cold precision of a modern mirror. You see what you feel. If you believe you're glowing, you are. If you think your skin is clearer after a balm, the dim shine in the basin confirms it. Still, the hunger for clarity persisted. In market stalls, Glass beads were sold not just as jewelry but as makeshift viewing tools. Some women swore if you stared into the flat end of a bead under moonlight, it would show your truest face. Others carried small discs of obsidian or smooth river stones, polished until they reflected shadows. One village girl you met had a trick. She'd pour fresh milk into a black bowl and let it sit by the window. "It shows your flaws," she whispered. "But only the ones you're ready to see." You pass through a convent, where a nun adjusts her wimple in front of a water trough. She doesn't lean close. She doesn't smile. Just checks for symmetry, balance. Not beauty, but alignment. Harmony. In this world, appearance isn't divorced from the spiritual. A crooked reflection might hint at a crooked soul. A freckle near the eye could be a blessing or a mark of pride, depending on who's doing the looking. And therein lies another truth: most women didn't see themselves alone. Their reflection was filtered through commentary. A neighbor remarking on your pallor. A priest warning against rouge. A lover praising your clean skin, though he's never seen you without soot. Your image was a chorus of other voices, some kind, some cruel, some indifferent. You remember an older woman in the village who swore off mirrors after 40. "What for?" she asked. "My hands know me better." She massaged fermented honey into her cheeks by feel alone, trusting texture and temperature over sight. And when you asked if she missed seeing herself, she shook her head. "I'm still here," she said. "The bees still know me." But not everyone felt that freedom. In urban guilds, apprentices and maids were expected to present themselves with tidiness. Too plain, and you were forgettable. Too bold, and you were suspicious. And with no clear mirrors, the line was easy to cross. A crooked braid. Uneven powder. Lips stained unevenly with berry juice. Mistakes invited whispers. Whispers invited consequences. There's a fringe tidbit passed around by older merchants: some women carried small lead mirrors not to see themselves, but to judge the beauty of others in secret. Held low, angled just so, they could observe without being seen. A primitive compact. A medieval side-eye. You wonder what that says about how power worked, even in quiet glances. In the apothecary's chamber, you find something strange: a reflective board, made of tin and covered in wax. It doesn't reflect. Instead, it's meant to be scratched with a pin to mark blemishes noticed by touch or comment. "She had one here," the apothecary says, pointing to a dent. "And she thought one might come here, after childbirth." A log of imagined skin. A map of memory. You marvel at the precision, someone trying to remember what they looked like, without actually looking. There's one mirror, though, that never lies. Water. But only when it's still. In rain barrels, ponds, and deep wells, women glimpse their faces while drawing water. Some say the water's opinion matters most. It shifts when you frown. It ripples with your laughter. It blurs when your hands tremble. It humbles and flatters at once. One woman you meet dips her hands into a barrel, then stares. "I ask it questions," she says. "Do I look like my mother? Would he still love me if I lost my hair? Am I still beautiful in the dark?" You don't ask what the answers are. Some things aren't meant to be shared. Historians still debate whether mirrors made people more self-critical or more self-aware. Some argue that a woman who rarely saw her own face might feel freer. Others claim she became more reliant on societal approval, more vulnerable to rumor and reputation. You're not sure. But you do know this: the first time you glimpse your own reflection, real, direct, unavoidable, you flinch. Not from ugliness, but from recognition. It's a face you imagined more than you've truly known. You pass by a shop where a merchant displays a Venetian mirror the size of your palm, framed in ivory. It costs more than a cow. A noblewoman stares into it, tilting it side to side, frowning. She mutters about her chin, her brow, the way her left eye seems smaller. She looks haunted. As if the mirror has spoken out loud. You wonder if that's what wealth buys, clarity so sharp it cuts. You think of the women who used honey not for what it made them look like, but for how it made them feel. The way it softened their touch. The way it shimmered under candlelight. The way it convinced them, however briefly, that their skin held something golden, something worth preserving. And maybe that's why fermented honey became so beloved. Not just because it worked, but because it offered a kind of reassurance. In a world where mirrors lied, where sight was unreliable, honey offered something tactile. You could feel it fizz. You could watch it glow. You could believe in its magic without needing proof. You return to your basin one last time. The brass is warm now, touched by sun and story. You look into it again, and your face swims back. Not sharp. Not symmetrical. But alive. And behind you, in the metal's shimmer, you think you see others, faint outlines of women long gone. They're adjusting their scarves, patting their cheeks, sighing at the same shadows. You smile at them. Or maybe they smile at you. It's hard to tell. You're walking along the edge of a medieval herb garden when you catch a faint scent on the wind. It's sweet at first, like fresh honey, but then sharper, tangier, like cider that's gone rogue or wine that's been left too long in the sun. You follow your nose past lavender bushes and drying racks of sage until you find the source, a small wooden bowl left out on a windowsill, shaded by an old linen cloth. You lift the cloth and peer inside. It's honey, but it's not golden anymore. It's darker, cloudy, and bubbling gently at the edges. A thin white film has formed across the top. The smell is stronger up close, sweet, sour, and very much alive. This isn't spoiled. It's fermenting. And that's exactly the point. The woman who owns the house comes out, wiping her hands on her apron. Still breathing, she says, nodding at the bowl. Give it 2 more days, and it'll be ready. Ready for what? A drink? A trap? A prank? She laughs. Your skin, she says. It opens the pores. Draws out the bad humors. Makes you glow. You blink. She's serious. In this world, fermentation isn't just about food. It's transformation. It's power. It's what turns grain into bread, milk into cheese, grapes into something holy. So why not honey into medicine for the face? Historians still argue whether medieval women understood the chemistry of fermentation or simply learned its effects through observation and repetition. Some say it was accidental, the result of leaving honey uncovered in a warm kitchen. Others believe it was entirely intentional, passed down in quiet recipes, whispered with the same reverence as a prayer. You glance back at the bowl. The bubbles are slow, rhythmic, like tiny heartbeats rising through the thick liquid. That means it's good, the woman says. If it goes quiet, it's dead. Fermented honey, in this world, is believed to be active. Not just chemically, but spiritually. The bubbling means it's working, fighting, cleansing, breathing. Women say it draws out poisons, not just from the body, but from the mind. Smear it on your temples, and you'll sleep better. Dab it on your chest, and grief lifts. Add a pinch of rosemary and it protects your dreams. Is any of it true? Who knows? But in a world with few certainties, belief is a balm all its own. You travel deeper into the village and find a group of women gathered around a pot suspended over low coals. The smell is overwhelming, yeast, wax, and crushed herbs. One woman stirs slowly with a wooden rod, while another holds up a small vial of what looks like frothy sap. Add it too soon and it fights the honey, she says. Wait too long and it eats the sweetness. They're making something halfway between mead and mask. Not for drinking. For soaking cloth, for applying to skin, for rituals done in silence. One young girl dips a fingertip in and touches it to her lip. She hisses. It bites. And that's part of the fascination. Fermentation makes honey unpredictable. A little too warm and it curdles. Too cold and it stalls. Time is both ally and enemy. Women keep jars on windowsills, on high shelves, buried in the ground, or tied to rafters. Some turn each day. Others never touch them once sealed. And when they finally open them, it's like unwrapping a secret, one that might heal or sting. A fringe tidbit drifts your way. In parts of Germany, women supposedly added crushed ants to honey to awaken the fizz. In northern France, some mixed in gooseberries or crabapple juice to quicken fermentation. And in the Baltics? Birch sap, if you could get it. Anything alive. Anything wild. You sit beside a midwife who swears by lively honey for postpartum cleansing. Rub it on the belly, the thighs, she says. It reminds the body to return to itself. You ask what she means. She shrugs. It pulls things back in. There's something poetic about that. In a time when most women's lives are shaped by forces they cannot see. Laws, husbands, bloodlines, the whims of the church, fermenting honey gives them a kind of control. You can feel it working. Hear it. Smell it change. You don't need a priest or a physician to tell you it's doing something. Your skin does. One apothecary, more literate than most, keeps notes on the stages of fermentation in his personal ledger. You sneak a peek. He writes of the 2nd day sting, the 7th day bloom, and the 14th day calm. He swears the honey becomes less aggressive over time, more soothing, more pliant. Like a lover grown gentle with age, he muses, before blushing and changing the subject. You find another woman, older, half-blind, who dips a cloth in fermented honey and presses it to her wrists. It remembers the heat of the sun, she says. When winter comes, it keeps me warm. You ask if it's superstition. She frowns. It's memory, she says. That's stronger than faith. Historians still debate whether this use of honey was medicinal or cosmetic. The line is blurry at best. What makes skin soft also soothes inflammation. What cleanses a wound also clears a blemish. And in a time when medical care was inconsistent at best and dangerous at worst, a bubbling pot of honey was safer than most treatments. You learn that some noble women deliberately fermented honey with rose petals, thyme, and even a pinch of wine yeast. They called it awakening balm. It was applied before evening gatherings or intimate visits. Said to bring color to the cheeks and calm to the nerves. One recipe you overhear calls for honey aged till breathless, then woken with smoke and stirred by moonlight. Whether metaphor or method, it's hard to tell. And for women accused of witchcraft, fermentation was often a red flag. If a woman had bubbling pots, hidden jars, or strange-smelling mixtures, it was assumed she was brewing spells. Some were punished simply for leaving honey too long near the fire. Yet ironically, these same accusations reveal just how widespread the practice was. Everyone was fermenting something. The only question was, who was allowed to do it openly? You find yourself beside a quiet riverbank, where jars have been nestled between stones to cool slowly over days. A girl checks them one by one, listening closely for a fizz. She offers you a dab. It tickles your fingers, then leaves a faint buzz behind. Alive, she says. Just right. You ask her how she knows when it's perfect. She shrugs. When it sings. That's the word they keep using, alive. As if the honey has a spirit. A mood. And in many ways, it does. Not just in the chemical sense, though that's true too. But in how it feels. How it reminds you of change. Of time. Of patience rewarded. One final tale reaches your ears, a noble woman who fermented her honey for a full year, adding petals from every season, herbs from every moon phase. She used it only once, on the night before her wedding. I wanted to bring every version of myself to that bed, she said later. The spring girl. The harvest woman. The winter widow I hadn't met yet. And maybe that's the deepest fascination. Fermented honey isn't just a tool. It's a record. Of days past. Of moods changed. Of hopes folded into sweetness and left to shift quietly in the dark. You close your eyes and smell it one more time, sour, sweet, wild. Like memory. Like something becoming something else. The air is thick. Not just with heat, but with fear. You walk slowly past the closed shutters and chalk-marked doors of a town that's seen too many funerals this month. The usual bustle is gone. Markets are quiet, churches half-empty, and the taverns smell more like vinegar than ale. Something has changed. And everyone knows why. The plague. Or something like it. But there's no word for it, not really. People call it the pest, the air sickness, the black wind. They don't understand how it spreads, only that it does. And that once it touches a house, that house goes silent. So the living have turned to superstition, medicine, prayers, and, for some women, to honey. Specifically, fermented honey. You enter a home where a young woman stands at her doorframe, rubbing something amber onto her arms and neck. Her face is already covered, cheeks glowing with a faint golden film that smells of herbs and wine. She meets your eyes, not with fear, but with quiet certainty. It keeps the bad air out, she says. If you smell sweet, the sickness can't find you. You've heard the theory before. That disease travels in smells, miasma, the scholars call it. Bad odors, especially from rotting things, are believed to carry illness into the body through the nose. If that's true, then sweet scents, honey, lavender, vinegar, roses, might work as shields. A kind of olfactory armor. And in this house, the whole family is armored. The baby's swaddled in a cloth soaked in floral water. The grandmother chews a honey-soaked clove. Even the cat smells faintly of thyme and wax. Historians still argue whether any of this worked. Probably not. But it reveals something deeper, the desperate logic of the time. Without microscopes or germ theory, scent became sense. Smell became science. And anything that masked the stench of death was treated as a lifeline. You visit an apothecary who's mixing a new batch of sickness balm. It's a murky blend of fermented honey, vinegar, crushed mint, and powdered bark. He slathers it on the wooden countertop. Rub this on your chest, neck, behind the ears, he says. Keep the humors balanced. Keep the bad airs confused. You ask what he means by confused. He grins. Sickness follows the nose. Trick the nose, trick the sickness. It's circular logic. But then again, everything is when fear takes root. One noblewoman you meet insists on coating her face each morning with a mask made from aged honey, burnt orange peel, and powdered pearls. The honey traps the air, she claims. The pearls reflect light. And the orange? Just smells better than death. She laughs, but only a little. In the poorer quarters, women line their doorways with honeyed herbs, pressed into bundles, hung with twine. They smear honey along windowsills, not for bugs, but for blessings. Children are made to lick honey off spoons each morning, not for nutrition, but so the sweet runs through them. One mother whispers that the pest can't live in sweetness. It's too bitter, she says. It turns away. A fringe tidbit surfaces from a woman who claims her sister survived the last outbreak by covering her whole body in fermented honey and sleeping in the woods for 3 nights. The bees thought she was one of them, she says, dead serious. And bees don't get sick. You try not to laugh. But it sticks with you. There's a scene you won't forget, a group of midwives, gathered outside a chapel, dabbing honey on the wrists and foreheads of the pregnant. They murmur a chant as they do it. Seal the skin. Sweeten the breath. Protect the child. Is it prayer? Is it medicine? Maybe both. One woman rubs honey along the spine of her daughter, tracing a line from neck to tailbone. It keeps the shadows from following, she says. They like the smell of rot. They hate the bees. And perhaps there's something symbolic there. Bees, in medieval thought, were pure, even divine. Their honey never spoiled. Their wax burned without smoke. They were the creatures of saints and silence. So to coat oneself in honey, especially living, bubbling, breathing honey, was to become untouchable. Protected by sweetness. Hidden in light. You remember a nun who keeps a small vial of fermented honey in her robes at all times. Not for skin, but for scent. She uncorks it before prayer. The Lord deserves sweetness, she says. Even in plague. You ask if she's afraid. She smiles faintly. Only of forgetting to smell. But of course, there's a darker side. In some towns, women who used too many sweet things were accused of pride, or worse, vanity. One mid-level merchant's wife was burned in the square, not for witchcraft, but for masking the signs of sickness. They thought she was hiding the plague with powder and perfume. Her honey pot was still warm when they took her. Historians debate whether the church encouraged or condemned these practices. Some records suggest priests gave out honey mixed with holy water during outbreaks. Others show sermons condemning women who used scent to confuse God's justice. You meet a healer on the outskirts of town, old, barefoot, hands stained with wax. She tells you her recipe in a whisper: fermented honey, rose oil, nettle, and a pinch of night. You ask what that last ingredient is. She just smiles. That which sleeps inside the jar. She dabs a bit on your neck. It stings. Then cools. Then warms again. The body will decide what to keep, she says. And what to push out. And that's the strange logic of it all. In a world where illness is invisible, the body becomes a battlefield, and women become both soldier and shield. The creams and masks and oils are not just beauty rituals. They're lines of defense. Fermented honey, especially, is prized not just for what it does to the skin, but what it might keep out. You're told of women who placed honey jars at the foot of their beds, believing the bubbling drew sickness from the air. Others smeared it on door hinges, hoping the scent would confuse evil spirits. One even claimed her child survived the fever because she placed a drop of alive honey under his tongue each night. He dreamed of flowers, she said. And no one who dreams of flowers ever dies. A charming thought. Possibly nonsense. But comforting. You find yourself back in the apothecary's workshop, watching as he seals a new batch of plague balm in wax-stoppered jars. He holds one up to the light. The honey inside fizzes faintly. Still working, he says. Still fighting. You ask if he believes it helps. He nods. Not always. But it keeps the women from crying. And that, I think, is medicine too. And maybe that's the core of it. Fermented honey wasn't a cure, not for disease, not for death. But it was a gesture. A ritual. A way of saying, I am not powerless. I will not wait. I will fight with what I have. With sweetness. With scent. With a bit of bubbling hope. You walk through the town one last time. The air is still heavy, but now it carries layers: lavender, vinegar, wax, and under it all, that strange, sharp sweetness of honey just beginning to turn. You stop in front of a home marked by chalk. A jar sits on the stoop. The lid is off. The honey inside bubbles gently. A note rests beside it, for the next one. May it shield you. You close your eyes and breathe in. You find yourself standing at a crowded crossroads in a medieval port town. Behind you, a dusty row of carts selling dried apples and boiled wool. Ahead, the smell of the sea, and ships bobbing gently along the dock. But what draws your attention isn't the harbor, or the gulls, or even the silver coins flashing between hands. It's a small booth draped in gauzy cloth, flanked by jars and trays filled with colored powders, folded parchments, and bottles that glint like treasure. A young woman leans over one of the tables, sniffing a tiny flask. They say it comes from Cairo, she tells you, eyes wide. Smells like heaven and cloves. You lean in too, and she's not wrong. The scent is thick, golden, and strange, somewhere between spice and syrup, with a floral note that lingers. This, she explains, is attar, a rare perfume oil. Just a drop on the wrist, and you'll smell like royalty for days. She doesn't own it, of course. Can't afford to. But the merchant offers samples for a fee. A single copper gets you a dab, a fantasy, and the lingering illusion that you're not a fishmonger's daughter but a Persian queen. And that's the appeal. These jars, these balms, these powders, they promise more than beauty. They promise escape. You move from table to table. Here, myrrh, ground into powder. There, crushed cinnamon bark, imported from the East. A paste called ash-shabab, or youth salve, made of almond oil, wax, and something secret. A favorite of the caliph's wives, the vendor insists. 3 drops under the eyes, and you'll weep like a girl again. Historians still debate the accuracy of these claims. Some of the ingredients were likely European in origin, merely renamed to sound foreign and impressive. Others genuinely came from long distances, across the Mediterranean, along the Silk Road, through Alexandria, Antioch, and Venice. But to the women buying them, the truth mattered less than the story. The more exotic the origin, the more magical the effect. You pass a merchant offering powdered pearl and ground coral, each sealed in delicate pouches of embroidered cloth. For the lips, he explains. When mixed with honey and crushed figure. A noblewoman samples a bit on the back of her hand. Soft, she murmurs. Like wax from a holy candle. There's something quietly subversive in all this. Medieval Europe, with its dirt roads and smoky hearths, was obsessed with cleanliness it could rarely achieve. The world was cold, the food bland, the air heavy with livestock and damp. But these imported luxuries, musk, sandalwood, ambergris, offered an alternate reality. 1 drop could transport you to a desert bathhouse, a sun-drenched palace, a shaded garden where women spoke poetry and bathed in rosewater. A fringed tidbit surfaces. In some courts, women believed that frankincense smoke, when inhaled while fasting, could lighten the skin. Not by magic, but by refining the soul. Purer thoughts, purer flesh, one text claimed. Though of course, historians now doubt whether any such effect ever occurred. But the practice was real. Women sat by fires, draped in shawls, breathing slow tendrils of perfumed smoke in hopes of becoming something finer. You watch a young servant girl run her finger along a stick of solid perfume. She presses it behind her ears and inhales. Her eyes flutter closed. You ask what it's made of. She doesn't know. Only that her mistress wears it before court. It smells like far away, she says. There's a vendor grinding saffron into powder. A scandalous amount, more than most households would use in a year. He mixes it with fermented honey, a splash of wine, and powdered egg shell. Face paint, he says. For special nights. You raise an eyebrow. He shrugs. Weddings. Or sins. Some formulas are carefully guarded. You see a veiled woman hand over 2 silver coins for a tiny scroll, which she tucks into her bodice without looking at it. Recipes were as prized as relics. Written in secret, copied with care, passed between women like contraband. One scroll reads, for cheeks like pomegranates and lips like dusk, mix juice of mulberry, ash of vine leaves, and honey kept under the moon. Poetic. possibly useless. But poetry is its own kind of cure. A merchant in Venetian dress opens a lacquered box to reveal lumps of something dark and waxy. From India, he says. Burn it in your chamber. The smell drives out dreams of sickness. You don't know whether to believe him, but the scent is compelling, heavy, smoky, with a strange sweetness that clings to your throat. In another stall, a woman sells sleep stones, dipped in fermented honey and left to dry in the sun. Put one under your tongue, she says. You'll dream of silk and no husbands. She laughs, but not unkindly. Historians still argue whether these imported goods were actually effective, or merely symbolic. Did the ambergris soften the skin, or was it just the honey base doing the work? Did myrrh cleanse the soul, or simply cover the stench of bad meat? It's hard to say. But the faith was real. The rituals were real. The desire to become something else, if only for a moment, was very real. You pause at a display of masks, papier-mâché forms coated in scented paste. Some are meant to be worn at night, held gently to the face. Others are pressed onto skin and left to dry, then peeled away with prayers. A mother buys one for her daughter. For your name day, she says. So the priest sees how bright you are. And there it is again, that link between scent and light, between beauty and holiness. In a time when mirrors were rare and dim, women learned to see themselves through story, through scent, through the hands of those who touched their faces and said, "You are lovely." You hear whispers of a traveling healer who sells a cream said to glow in darkness. It's made from honey, powdered moonstone, and something called milk of lions. No one knows what that means. Maybe it's a joke. Maybe it's a spell. The woman selling it says only this: it's for women who need to be seen. Even when the candle dies. You walk past a row of dyed silks, their colors deep and dizzying, indigo, carmine, golden saffron. You imagine how they must look wrapped around someone's shoulders, how the scent of foreign perfume must rise from skin warmed by sunlight. You imagine the dreams these women carry, of bazaars they've never seen, palaces they'll never enter, and skin so smooth that even queens would lean close to ask how. One girl tells you she saves every coin to buy a single vial of resinous oil from Byzantium. She mixes it with beeswax and uses it to smooth her hair. Smells like jasmine and smoke, she says. Like the kind of woman who doesn't wait. The phrase sticks with you. Like the kind of woman who doesn't wait. Maybe that's what all this is about, not just scent or softness or even beauty. But agency. Fantasy. Movement in a world that keeps women still. A drop of exotic oil, a smear of fermented honey, a secret recipe tucked into a skirt pocket, it all adds up to something defiant. You reach the end of the dockside market just as the sun begins to set. The last light catches on bottles and jars and silk threads. And as women clutch their little luxuries close, some real, some imitation, you realize that exotic imports weren't just things. They were dreams. Packaged. Bottled. Whispered. And sometimes, worn. You find yourself in a quiet corner of a monastery, where the air is heavy with the scent of beeswax and dried lavender. The stone walls hold whispers from centuries past, and the flickering candlelight casts soft shadows on bundles of herbs hanging to dry. Here, amidst the stillness, lie the secrets of countless women, recipes scrawled in faded ink on fragile parchment, pages softened by years of hands tracing these words again and again. These aren't mere instructions, they are spells of care, passed down like precious heirlooms from mother to daughter, from nun to novice. You open a small book, its worn cover stitched with delicate thread, and peer inside. The handwriting is careful and flowing, sometimes a prayer, sometimes a recipe, sometimes a fragment of a song. One page promises, for cheeks that glow like the sweetest apple, mix rose hips with crushed almonds and honey left to bubble beneath a new moon. You smile, imagining women long ago stirring pots beneath the same moonlight, hoping for that elusive radiance. Another page instructs how to make a mask from egg yolks, lavender, and snail water, a strange, slippery concoction said to soothe angry skin and invite gentle dreams. You picture a circle of women, gathered after dusk in a kitchen warmed by a low fire, passing around jars of fragrant salves and soft powders. They don't measure or count but know by feel and scent when a potion is ready. A midwife's whispered advice, a grandmother's secret, a sister's careful instruction, all mingling in the smoke-filled air. Sometimes the recipes are copied by hand in convents, where nuns mix healing herbs between prayers. Other times, they are tucked inside velvet pouches and carried secretly across borders, translated from Arabic to Latin to French, whispered in courtly chambers and village homes alike. One manuscript claims to hold the beauty secrets of Cleopatra herself, though penned far from Egypt, in a quiet Yorkshire abbey. It calls for goat's milk, wine-soaked raisins, crushed pearls, and honey fermented for 11 days. Whether or not it ever graced the queen's skin, the words shimmer with promise. Nearby, a Venetian recipe insists that rubbing olive oil and ashes beneath the arms keeps heartbreak at bay. You wonder how many young girls tried it, hoping to soften their sorrows. Back in the marketplace, women cluster close, sharing their knowledge with hands and voices. The baker's daughter explains how her aunt swears by stirring a wart-removing salve with a goose feather, a charm that keeps the mixture honest, she says, so it won't curdle. In a grander home, a noblewoman and her attendants compare scents and textures of their treasured jars. One stirs her blend precisely 40 times clockwise by candlelight. Another sings softly to hers as it cools, believing the song breathes life into the balm. You overhear tales of a recipe passed down through generations: mashed dates, ground ivy, honey, and vinegar, rubbed into the scalp for hair as dark and glossy as blackened glass. Another blend calls for fennel seeds, rosewater, and egg whites, creating a glaze so reflective it offends the mirror. Pages are filled with invocations, prayers to Saint Agnes to keep blemishes away, warnings that if a mixture boils too fast, the skin may ache with winter's chill. The line between cure and curse feels thin. An old healer swears by a poultice of honey, nettle leaf, and angel's breath, wild chamomile gathered on stormy nights. She says it only works if applied before thunder rolls across the hills. You breathe in the earthy, sour sweetness of her latest batch. Good for elbows and regrets, she chuckles. Market women debate the best way to store fermented honey. One insists it needs to rest beside garlic to balance the fire. Another swears by burying her jar in the soil for 7 nights, then setting it on the windowsill under the stars. The bees like it better that way, she claims. You pause before a small shop overflowing with folded parchment tied with twine. Each slip holds a recipe, for fair hands, for swollen eyes, to bring color to winter lips. The shopkeeper says these were penned by her grandmother and sells them one at a time, no refunds. A girl with dirt-smudged cheeks buys one marked, to tempt a mirror to lie. You don't ask what's inside, the mystery is enough. Behind a baker's oven, you find a leather folio, its pages stained by heat and steam. Written there are spells for jealous skin, new beginnings, and forgotten loves, recipes combining sage, marigold, lemon balm steeped in honey, beeswax melted with rosemary oil, and lavender soaked in milk, to be poured down drains at midnight. You imagine the weary woman who wrote these, her heart heavy but still yearning to glow. A nun who's copied dozens of these recipes shares that the best salve requires patience. Let it rest as long as a love letter goes unanswered, she advises, then stir once more and apply to the neck. She smiles when asked if she still uses them. I'm too old for vanity but never for softness. Softness is what connects these women across time and place, their rituals less about youth than comfort. Recipes aren't just for beauty, they are spells of survival. Some include breadcrumbs, others require whispered words over jars. One odd recipe calls for chewing fennel seeds while thinking of a loved one, then spitting into honey before sealing it away for 40 days. On day 41, you will be seen, it promises. Whether anyone followed it is unknown, but maybe some did. As night falls, you find yourself curled beside a flickering candle in a warm kitchen. A girl stirs a pot of honey slowly, her eyes half closed. "My grandmother said to breathe into it," she murmurs, "just once, so it remembers you." You ask what it's for. "Cheeks," she replies softly, "and hearts." Surrounded by whispers, wax, and parchment, by secrets written and shared in trust, you realize these recipes, some real, some symbolic, are acts of devotion, to softness, transformation, and being seen in a world that often looks away. And the next time you pass a woman with glowing skin and the faintest scent of something spicy sweet, you might wonder what her secret is. Maybe she'll never tell. Or maybe, if you ask gently enough, she'll take your hand, lower her voice, and say, "Let me show you." But only if you promise to stir it widdershins. You sit quietly, thinking of all these women, those who carried their secrets in books and jars, those who whispered them behind closed doors, those who mixed, stirred, and applied balms in kitchens and chambers through centuries. Their knowledge wasn't just about beauty, but survival. Not vanity, but comfort. Not youth, but softness. And as the candle flickers low, you feel a part of their story, bound by the timeless human need to care for oneself, to be seen, to be held, to be loved, even if only by your own reflection in a worn brass mirror, or in the warm glow of fermented honey on your skin. You step quietly into the warm, steamy air of a medieval bathhouse, where the scent of herbs mingles with the faint musk of damp stone and wood. The dim light filters through small, stained glass windows, casting gentle hues on the swirling mist that rises from the steaming pools. Every splash of water echoes softly against the vaulted ceilings, blending with murmured conversations and the occasional clink of copper basins and the rustle of linen towels. This place is more than a bathhouse. It is a sanctuary, a refuge, a secret retreat from the cold, harsh world beyond its thick walls. Women of all ages and classes gather here, their bare skin glowing in the flickering candlelight. Some lean against the cool stone walls, wrapped in coarse linen towels, their hair damp and fragrant with rosemary and lavender. Others sit on low benches, exchanging soft laughter and whispered confidences, their voices weaving a gentle tapestry of shared stories and solace. Attendants move with practiced grace, dipping fingers into fragrant oils and honey-based balms, spreading the golden salve slowly over tired muscles and weary spirits alike. Bathing here is not a mere chore, it is an art, a ritual, a momentary escape where dirt, worries, and weariness are washed away beneath the steam and glow of beeswax candles. You watch as a young maid dips her fingers into a pot of fermented honey mixed with crushed rose petals and delicate herbs, carefully spreading the golden balm over a noblewoman's cheeks. The lady sighs, her eyes fluttering closed in contentment. "It softens the skin," she murmurs, "and calms the mind." The thick, sweet scent of honey with its faint tang of fermentation lingers in the warm air, wrapping around the women like a comforting shawl. In this moment, the cruel world of cold stone streets, relentless labor, and strict social codes seems impossibly distant. Yet bathing in the Middle Ages was fraught with complexity. Water was precious and often cold, especially during the long, bitter winters. The risk of illness lurked in prolonged soaks or scalding temperatures, making bathing both a luxury and a hazard. Many women layered scent and texture, rosewater rinses, vinegar sprays, honey salves, to create illusions of softness and cleanliness without the need for full immersion. The bathhouse became a place where these rituals intertwined, where cleansing merged with comforting, where physical care met spiritual balm. You overhear a tale about a woman who nearly fainted after a long soak in scalding water, saved only by a swift application of honey blended with lavender and chamomile. The soothing mixture eased her burnt skin and steadied trembling limbs. Stories like these ripple quietly through the bathhouse, passed between women who understand the fragile balance between risk and reward in these precious moments of self-care. The air hums with soft murmurs and rustling fabrics, the subtle glow of beeswax candles flickering against damp stone walls. The mingling scents of rosemary, thyme, sage, and honey rise like a silent hymn to healing and hope. You notice a child clutching her mother's hand, her skin still damp and shining as they prepare to leave, wrapped in coarse cloaks but glowing with rare softness. From the bathhouse, your journey leads you to the bedchamber, a private sanctuary of calm intimacy and deeper care. Heavy curtains of velvet and linen surround the beds, muffling the bustling sounds of the household. Within these veiled walls, fermented honey is not merely applied, it is revered. Women slip into soft linen gowns, their skin still fragrant from the bathhouse's herbs and honeyed salves. Some prepare honey masks as a final nightly ritual, believing the bubbling sweetness will soothe their dreams and guard against nightmares. Others anoint their hair with oils infused with honey and herbs, carefully tying locks with silk ribbons or fragrance sachets to preserve softness and scent through the night. You watch a noblewoman whisper of a nightly routine taught by her mother. After the bathhouse, a gentle massage with honey, rosewater, and crushed pearl powder. It keeps the skin youthful and the heart calm, she explains softly. And it invites good fortune in love. Across the chamber, a younger woman presses a warm cloth soaked in fermented honey and herbs to her face, closing her eyes as the mask cools and sets. She believes it wards off evil spirits and restless dreams, a balm for both body and soul. In these intimate moments, the delicate dance between care and ritual unfolds, a dance between body and spirit, faith and superstition, longing and love. Bathing in beauty intertwine with prayer and hope, with the deep human desire for softness and sanctuary in a world often harsh and unyielding. You recall a tale of a healer who blended honey with rare spices and moonlight, creating a balm said to capture the magic of the night. Reserved for brides on their wedding night, it was a secret passed only among women trusted to keep its mystery. The scent alone conjured visions of shaded gardens and whispered promises beneath the stars. As night deepens, you feel the weight of centuries of women who lived and loved through these rituals. Fermented honey was more than a beauty product, it was a symbol of hope, a shield against life's sharp edges, a bridge between earth and the divine. The honey's warmth, its bubbling life, and the tender care it symbolized were acts of rebellion against age, silence, and the strict rules that sought to confine women. In their hands, honey became a promise of softness, a whispered prayer, a sacred secret. You settle into the hush of the bedchamber, honey and herbs still lingering on your skin. You breathe deeply, wrapped in the warmth of the honeyed night, feeling as if the glow of those ancient rituals still shines softly around you. The chamber is silent save for the gentle crackle of the hearth and the distant hoot of an owl. A single candle burns low, its flame dancing in shifting shadows. You imagine the women who once lay here, faces glistening with fermented honey, minds quieted by the soft promise of dawn. Perhaps they dreamed of brighter days, softer skin, kinder worlds. You close your eyes and inhale deeply. The scent of honey, rose, and herbs fills your senses, a balm not just for the body but for the soul. The rituals of bathhouse and bedchamber, so intertwined, remind you that beauty is never just skin deep. It is care, it is ceremony, it is connection. And as sleep pulls you gently under, you feel wrapped in the warmth of those timeless acts, soft hands, sweet scents, bubbling life. And know you are part of a long and unbroken chain of women who have sought comfort, strength, and grace in the glowing honeyed night. The sun sinks slowly beyond the horizon, its last golden fingers reaching out to caress the village's rooftops and winding lanes before surrendering to the deepening twilight. The sky blushes in gentle waves of rose and lavender, fading into a serene indigo that promises the coming night. As day exhales its final breath, the village quiets, and a calm settles over the stone and timber houses like a well-worn cloak. The marketplace, once alive with the clamor of voices and the vibrant colors of goods, now lies still. Stalls are shuttered and packed away with deliberate care, the rough hands of vendors folding cloths and gathering the day's earnings. Footsteps grow soft on the cobbles as the villagers retreat indoors, drawn by the hearth's warm glow and the promise of rest. The fading light signals not just the end of the day, but the beginning of a sacred time, a time of ritual and renewal, where bodies and spirits are gently prepared for the embrace of sleep. You wander slowly through the narrow streets, the familiar paths softened by dusk's tender shadow. The scent of wood smoke drifts thickly through the air, mingling with the subtle sweetness of drying herbs and the ever-present, comforting aroma of honey, its fermented richness a golden thread weaving through the fabric of night. The distant lowing of cattle and the rustle of leaves whisper softly, a lullaby sung by the earth itself. Your footsteps bring you to the threshold of a humble cottage, where a faint glow spills from the open door. Peering inside, you see a mother cradling her young daughter beside the hearth. The child's cheeks are flushed with warmth, and her damp hair clings to her neck as the mother dips a soft linen cloth into a basin of warm water scented with lavender, rosemary, and a generous spoonful of fermented honey. With hands tender and practiced, she cleanses her daughter's face and hands, the golden water shimmering in the candlelight like liquid sunlight. This act is far more than cleanliness, it is an intimate ritual of care and protection, a sacred gift passed from one generation to the next. The mother's soft voice hums a gentle prayer, a blessing woven with love and hope. Around them, the flickering flames dance, casting playful shadows that seem to hold the wisdom of ages. Beyond the hearth, you find a gathering of women seated close together, encircling a low wooden table cluttered with earthenware bowls, glass jars, wooden spoons, and bundles of dried herbs. One woman stirs a pot of fermented honey infused with chamomile, sage, and rose petals, its surface bubbling faintly as if alive with magic. Another crushes marigold blossoms into a fragrant powder, blending them with crushed pearl and honey aged under the light of the full moon. Each woman carefully applies a dab of the precious salve to her cheeks, temples, and neck, their fingers moving with the reverence of prayer. Their voices intertwine in soft incantations. Blessings for health, beauty, protection, and peace. The room fills with laughter and whispered secrets, a sacred chorus that binds them in sisterhood and strength. The mingling scents of beeswax candles, rosemary, thyme, and the rich sweetness of honey fill the air, rising like a prayer to unseen spirits. The crackling hearth lends its warmth, casting a golden glow upon the weathered stone walls and the soft faces of the women. In this moment, you feel the weight of countless generations of women who have gathered here, finding resilience and comfort through these gentle rituals of care. Outside, the day's labor has ended, and the village bees have nestled into their hives. Their persistent humming fades to silence, leaving behind the treasured honey, fermented, golden, and glowing softly in rustic jars that rest quietly on window ledges and within wooden cupboards. This honey is no mere sweetener. It is a balm of life, a symbol of persistence, patience, and the sweetness that endures amid hardship. A young woman steps forward from the circle, her skin luminous in the candlelight's flicker. She presses a final touch of fermented honey across her forehead and cheeks, the sticky warmth catching the glow like liquid amber. She inhales deeply, eyes fluttering closed as the sweet scent envelopes her. In this stillness, the worries of the day melt away, replaced by a calm certainty and the quiet promise of tomorrow. In a quieter corner, an elder woman carefully anoints her hands and neck with a balm made from honey, crushed sage, marigold, and nettle. Her voice, soft but unwavering, speaks of protection and tradition, the way these nightly acts create invisible shields against wandering spirits, sickness, and despair. The honey calls to the spirit of the bees, she murmurs, and they watch over us while we sleep. Her words are both prayer and charm, weaving a gentle cocoon around those who listen. Soft prayers drift through the night air, mingling with gentle chants and the soothing brush of fingertips over skin. These rituals, part medicine, part magic, part faith, are the last defenses against the unseen dangers lurking in the dark, the invisible ills that haunt the air, and the lonely shadows that creep into hearts. They are the fragile threads that hold the night together, binding body, mind, and spirit in a delicate dance of care. You wander back into the now silent streets, bathed in the silvery glow of a rising moon. The village breathes slowly, folding inward like a delicate flower closing for the night. You pause beside a wooden bench where a young girl sleeps, her face cradled beneath a honeyed cloth, cheeks glistening faintly like dew-kissed petals. Her breathing is steady, her dreams softened by the alchemy of fermented honey and whispered blessings. The scent of honey lingers in the cool night air, the delicate, persistent sweetness that binds women across centuries and miles. It is a symbol of care, resilience, and hope. In a world often harsh and unyielding, these nightly rituals are acts of quiet rebellion, declarations of softness and strength in the face of hardship. You take a deep breath, letting the warmth of the honeyed night fill your lungs and settle deep in your bones. The fading light, the prayers, the glowing jars, all remind you that even in darkness there is light. Even in silence there is song. Even in stillness there is life. You close your eyes, the last candle flickering low beside you, its flame dancing in the gentle draft. The honeyed scent wraps around you like a soft cloak, its warmth a tender embrace. You are connected, across time and space, to the women who have cared for themselves and each other through these simple, sacred acts. And as sleep gathers you in its quiet arms, you feel part of a long and unbroken chain, hands that have stirred, applied, and believed, skin that has glowed softly in candlelight, hearts that have whispered prayers into jars of fermented honey. You feel the pulse of this shared history, a warmth that will carry you gently through the night. The world softens around you, shadows deepen, and a hush falls. The honeyed night holds you close, a gentle promise that with dawn comes renewal. You drift into dreams wrapped in the glowing gold of ancient rituals, carried by the timeless sweetness of fermented honey and the enduring strength of care. And with the fading light, the final rituals, and the lingering scent of honey, you surrender fully to rest, wrapped in comfort, wrapped in ritual, wrapped in the glowing, golden promise of a new dawn.